Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Janae Tibbs-Shirani here with one of our double shot interviews. Today I'm joined by the Retirement Commissioner Diane Maxwell.
Morning.
Thank you for coming in, Diane.
That's okay.
I wanted to talk to you about retirement from a young person's perspective.
Right.
I suppose as younger people, the last thing often we think about is retirement when we are trying to pay off our student loan, we're trying to save for a home, and there seem to be so many financial hurdles that we need to jump over before we even start thinking about retirement.
So when we're doing a lot of work with young people to get them ready for retirement, but we have some rules. We don't mention the word retirement because in reality, if you try and draw it that far out, you tend to lose people. The best thing to do is really talk to them about the here and now. And if you can get people to make incremental advances in their financial situation across a lifetime, then they get to retirement in good shape without even noticing that was where they were heading. So a lot of the work we do, we take the word retirement out of it and we talk about good decisions today. I talk a lot, and I think you've heard me talk about this pivotal time between 16 and 24, which is where people come out of school or college, they borrow to buy their first car, they borrow to buy a stereo for the car, maybe wheels for the car, and an iPad and an iPhone and a number of other things, and quite quickly they can reach the early 20s with quite a bit of debt stacked up. If you add the 14 billion in student debt on top of that, people can enter their working career, their working lives, with a lot of debt behind them. If they're thinking about buying a house, they're nowhere near getting a deposit together because they've got so much debt.
And actually, I just wanted to step back when people first leave home, and I guess talk about the pressure, I guess, on parents and on young people to make good decisions as to whether they're going to go to university, or whether they're going to go into a trade, or take some time out of work, or do something else. Do you think high schools and universities are doing enough to educate young people about their options at that age?
Well, they're doing a lot more, and there's some really critical areas where they're working really well. One is with young Maori and Pacific students, thinking about professions that they may not be initially thinking about. And there's an extraordinary amount of work going on there, and also in the corporate sector. So a number of the banks are running open days for young Maori and Pacific students to say, you might not have thought about banking, come in and spend a few hours here and see what this thing looks like. So there is probably more going on than you would think. The group I'm really worried about are young women who, if you ask young women or young teenagers what they want to do, women will still say they want to go into caring professions, hairdressing, air hostess. Nothing wrong with any of those professions, but it means that we still have women reaching retirement so much less because they're earning so much less along the way. So I'm trying to encourage young girls to say, what do I want out of life? What am I going to do? What am I going to earn? And what kind of lifestyle is that going to bring me? And is that what I am hoping for out of my life? Because we still find that if you ask girls where they got those ideas from, there's often a mum or a grandma or an auntie who says, oh no dear, you can't be a doctor, you should do something else. Or, oh no dear, you couldn't possibly be a lawyer or a judge, you should be a clerk. And so there's still a fair bit of messaging going on that's stopping young women thinking about it. When you talk about people leaving home, I've just been reading a great piece in The Guardian, which is quite startling, about young people not leaving home.
Right.
And so what we've got across the UK, the US, a lot of Europe, and we're seeing in Australia and to some extent in New Zealand, is people in their 20s can't afford to leave home because they can't buy, and even renting's hard. So they're staying at home well into their 20s. Now, one of the problems we have with that is our birth rate, our fertility rate, is too low already. In New Zealand it's 1.9. Replacement rate for a population is 2.1. So the fact that people are going to be sitting at home with mum and dad till their late 20s and not going out and getting into a relationship or getting married and setting up a home is actually going to bite us further down the track. And there's a whole series of interviews with young people saying, I won't have children until at least my 30s because I can't afford the stuff that goes with it.
That's really interesting, because I find that even in New Zealand with my friend group, people, by the time they
Think about people
go to university, you do some travel, you do some working, next thing you know you're late 20s and haven't even thought about that. So
that's right.
So that is
that's
quite
right. So
interesting.
you think about our grandparents; they would have been getting married, having children in their 20s. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it does mean, in terms of an ageing population, what we don't need is a reduction in people having babies, because it's going to exacerbate the ageing population. So, I think about inheritance for this generation and the next generation. What will an inheritance look like? I think increasingly what parents will do is they'll give you a bed till you're 30. They'll give you a good education and some good advice. They may let you live with them again when you're 45, when you've got divorced, which is what the statistics would suggest. And then that's it. So if parents are retired for 30 years, they may actually burn through some of the equity in their property.
Yeah.
They may burn through their savings in a rest home. And actually what you're inheriting may be a lot less.
Interesting. Lot of interesting points there. I just want to talk a little bit about banks now, and yes. I guess hear your thoughts on whether you think banks should be taking more responsibility when lending young people money. I know when I went travelling, I needed to get a credit card to take with me overseas. I don't think I was really asked about, how much, what's my student loan like? The bank seemed pretty happy to give me a credit card with a big limit, not knowing or caring that I had actually had a huge student loan. Do you think they need to take more responsibility?
I have to be honest, that's not the bit that's keeping me up at night, really. Banks have quite stringent credit risk criteria. If they think you're not going to pay it back, they're far less likely to lend it. Credit card debt is problematic in that it's got really high interest rates, so it can cost you a lot to have credit card debt. Student loan debt is at 14 billion, but actually at least you've got an education along with it. I have to be honest, the credit that's really bothering me far more is that second and third and fourth tier lending. Bank lending, unsecured personal loans is 12 to 18%, and credit cards are probably 17 to 22%. Second, third, fourth tier lending, you're talking about 28 to 32%, maybe 45 to 50%. And administration costs on top. So if you think about where the real risk sits, the bits I'm really worried about are those high interest loans that are essentially for a stereo, a car, stuff that doesn't last long.
Sure.
So, we talk to young people. We talked to a young woman the other day who said she racked up 20 grand in debt from various lenders. Her parents stepped in and paid it all off for her, and a year later she's got another 20 racked up. And she looked around the lounge where she was being interviewed and she said, you know what, I can't even remember where that money went. I think the TV and maybe the stereo, but I don't know where the rest went. So when you think about lending, and there's about 15 billion in that type of consumer lending, and some of that other stuff isn't even captured by the Reserve Bank, some of that payday stuff. Where the pain sits is when it's high interest and can't be paid off.
Sure. All right. And then sort of moving along further, I guess, in one's life, when you go to thinking about KiwiSaver, starting work, should you go into KiwiSaver?
Yes, you should.
What incentives are there?
Yes, you should.
Do you think the way that $1,000 sort of initial bonus, what effect does that have?
I was disappointed that the $1,000 kickstart went. I understood the need to reduce it, and there was a need to reduce it. It cost $2.5 billion. So I think probably it needed to be reduced to a smaller group. I would love to have seen it retained for school leavers starting their first job.
Okay.
So a subset of people would qualify for that $1,000 kickstart.
Get them in there when they're younger.
To be fair, what was happening is it was going into bank accounts, into KiwiSaver accounts for a 5-year-old. Nothing else was going in, and then the $1,000 was being eaten away by fees. So there were some problematic areas there, but I would love to have seen it kickstart. For first jobs. So KiwiSaver, I think, is a phenomenal thing, and I think it's what's going to save us in the long term. I fully support young people being able to take money out of KiwiSaver to buy their first home. buying a home, paying down a mortgage is the single best thing you can do for your retirement. Reaching retirement mortgage-free is probably the best thing you can do. And at the moment, with the numbers don't stack up, average house price in Auckland is over 600k, average household income in Auckland is 100k. So at the moment, those figures aren't stacking up for young people, and it's not a comfortable path. But if you can do it by hook or by crook, it is the best thing you can do.
Right, interesting. And in terms of people who invest in property as their sort of retirement plan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's difficult because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So nobody should ever say investing in property is my only way to go. You should always diversify. At the moment, obviously, we've got low interest rates, and so people are what we call chasing yield. People are worried that a term deposit won't give them enough to live on if they're relying on income from their money. So the danger is that's when people start chasing riskier investments. That's when things go horribly wrong. That's when people succumb to scams and schemes because it looks like it's more money, and you get so hungry for it that you don't stop and look. So low interest rate environment, great for borrowers, not so great for savers. For young people at the moment in that low interest rate environment, if they can cobble together a deposit, if they can get themselves onto that ladder, if they can pull out their KiwiSaver money to put in, then they can start down that path. The thing about paying a mortgage down is it's a painful discipline, but it sucks the money out of your pay packet and it sticks it into an asset in quite a brutal way, and that is a good thing.
And you're moving forward.
And you're moving forward. If it's not sucking that money out, if you have that money left over at the end of the month because you're living with mum and dad, then what we're seeing is where it goes is an extra bottle of wine, an extra pair of shoes, a weekend away, a dinner out, and a $750 handbag. Unfortunately, without that brutal discipline of a mortgage, a home loan, the money's going into the day-to-day stuff, and that's not a great thing for this generation, ultimately.
Yeah, well, you're making me feel a bit guilty now.
Have you got a handbag sitting under here?
Yeah. Finally, something else I think about is that KiwiSaver's longevity. It seems like a long time until I'm going to retire, and I often wonder whether that money sitting there is really going to be worth anything when I come to retire, whether it's actually going to serve me a purpose then, or whether it'd be better using it now.
Look, anything you do is a risk. The thing about KiwiSaver is the government's putting money in, your employer's putting money in, and you're putting money in. So it's a joint effort. You're not going it alone. You can take it out for hardship, and you can take it out for your first home. So you can get your hands on it at different points, and it shouldn't be your only thing anyway. Diversification, spread, whatever it is you've got, KiwiSaver is a great thing. Try and get into the property market too. Try and have some savings on the side. The best thing you can do is spread that risk.
Sure. All right, Dan, well, that's probably a good place to leave it. There's
Great.
a lot for us to think about.
Yes.
Thank you for coming in.
Cool.
So I'm Janae Tibshirani from interest.co.nz, and today I've been joined by the Retirement Commissioner Diane Maxwell.